Please welcome Director of the Michigan Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity, Susan Corbin, President and Chief Executive Officer of Business Leaders for Michigan, Jeff Donofrio, Executive Director of Detroit Regional CEO Group, Dave Meador, Group Executive of Jobs, Economy, and Detroit at Work for the City of Detroit, Nicole Sherard-Freeman. And to moderate the discussion, please welcome President and Chief Executive Officer of the Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Foundation, Dave Egner.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. A quick story. It's 1921. My grandfather's father has been killed in a farming accident. They're 60 miles north of the Kentucky-Illinois border. At age 13, he drops out of school, catches a series of trains to Detroit because he can lie about his age, work in a factory, and live in a boarding house for about a year while he's saving some money home to stabilize the family. Migrates south to the St. Louis area where he has some family, and at age 30, in 1930, but he's now pushing 20, he gets a job at a Monsanto plant as a janitor. 42 years later, he retires, the highest hourly paid employee in the plant. Fast forward to 1961. My father drops out of high school. Why? Because his new wife is about to give birth to a charming, handsome young baby. He was a voc ed kid, auto mechanics. Got a job at a garage. Parlayed that into another job at another garage. Started building train cars for Anheuser-Busch to carry iced beer across the country, and made quite a middle-class income. Those days are over. You can't find your way to those jobs today, if those jobs exist. And if they do exist, they're not paying a living wage. The world has changed. What great news we saw from Mayor Duggan yesterday, the unemployment rate of the city, down at it was the lowest point in 50 years. Wasn't that great? Yeah, I'm here to bop that bubble. Sobering news. There's at your place is this study information from Citizens Research Council in Alterum, looking at the trends moving forward. If we do nothing as a state, this study will tell you what it will look like. Let me tell you what our population will look like in 2050 if we don't do anything to correct this problem. The population change will be minus 6% in 0 to 17 youth, minus 6% in 18 to 24-year-old college level, plus 2% in primary working age of 25 to 64, and if you're 65 plus, 30% growth in our population. We're going to get older, there'll be less workers, and I want to know who's going to pay to take care of me when my Medicare kicks in. And you should be worried about the same things. Our workforce participation rate, despite the good unemployment rate, is one of the lowest in the nation, currently below 60%. And this panel is going to tell us what we need to be worried about and what we need to be thinking about. So let me jump right to a question, and we're going to get to a conversation with the audience as quickly as we can. So how bad is it, and what are you doing about it, Susan?
Well, we have a number of things going on at the state level. I think when the governor was elected, she saw some of the headwinds that we were going to be facing. She created our department, the Michigan Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity. She really felt that we needed to have all of our traditional labor functions, our employment and training, our workforce development dollars, our housing and community development, and our economic development activity all working very closely. We all need to be very closely aligned, working towards the same goals. So she created our department, and she also created one of her signature initiatives rests in our department, and that is her goal, 60 by 30. By 2030, she wants to have 60% of our citizens with a postsecondary degree. Dave touched on our labor force participation rate. We know that if someone has a skills certificate, a community college degree, certainly a 4-year degree, they are much more likely to be in our workforce, and they're going to be in our workforce earning a good paycheck. So, that's just some of the small, I don't want to say small efforts. It's a very, very, very significant effort. But I really feel like getting our citizens educated is going to help address some of the things that you've talked about.
Great. Jeff, what's happening at BLM on this topic?
Well, lots of things. I mean, we've been talking about it for the last couple of weeks, but especially on the island here, about the most recent report we put out on the holistic framework for economic development that's necessary to get us to be a top 10 state. And we talk always, since 2009, about how we become a top 10 state. Back in 2009, we were, pretty bad. We were 49th, 50th. We're 31st today. We should celebrate that success that got us there. But when you look at, Dave, what you said too about income, about education, how they're very much linked, we've got to make sure that income and education are part of our approach of creating a better state, creating that framework and strategy for economic development that is going to get us to be more competitive and beat out Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky, Tennessee, not just for jobs, but for people. So, let's look at some of the numbers. When we look 9 years ago, we were 32nd in the country for the percentage of our population with a post-secondary credential. Today, we're 37th. It's not that we didn't grow and didn't have success, it's that other states grew faster. Now, I think the initiative, the goal that the governor has taken on, that Susan is shepherding as LEO director is really important around 60 by 30. But we have to make sure that we give time and we put our full shoulders to the different programs and initiatives that are going to make that a success. So the Reconnect program, the Futures for Frontliners program, the Michigan Achievement Scholarship, improving various systems at the K-12, community college, and 4-year level so it's easier to get that credential. And that a credential is actually one of value, because one of the things that we see, and I used to call it when I was at the city of Detroit, train and pray initiatives, right? Where we put someone into a training and we pray really hard that they get a job at the end of it. That can't be what we invest in. There are so many job openings, there are so many gaps, there's so much opportunity to build, especially in those knowledge economy jobs that are going to offer family sustaining wages in a way that those manufacturing jobs did so many years ago. If we can deliberately put people into programs that are going to help them achieve that, and then connect them with employers at the front end of their education, that's going to be a really transformational effect for Michigan. It's going to make sure that we aren't below average in our income, which right now, starting in 2000, we saw a gap between U.S. and Michigan's income, and that's only widened since recessions and economic disruptions and the pandemic.
Well, Dave, now leading the CEO's group, former vice chair at DTE, you've seen this from a couple of angles. What's the CEO group doing?
Sure, Dave. I would start by saying, this week we heard a lot about competition. We've got to grow the population. We have to dramatically reform our K through 12 system, including, I would add, special education. We have to really look at economic development. We've been doing a great job, but that doesn't mean there's not improvement, that we can take it up another level. But what you haven't heard about is Michigan competing on workforce development. And if we are going to grow and diversify this economy and make it a great top 10 place to live and raise a family, we're going to have to do all of the above, in my view. So the backdrop is, if you went back in history, there was an oversupply of labor. And because of that, corporations, their HR function, were set up to do what we would call filter out. And often looking where the language was, we're going to hire the best and the brightest. Also was not an inclusive hiring system, but they didn't have to worry about supply. And now today, nationally and in this state and this region, we have an undersupply of labor. So in the Detroit region right now, there's 200,000 open jobs that business can't fill. It's not very good for existing businesses, certainly not good for economic development. So the business community has stood back and said, just like everything else, we got to benchmark around the country and understand best practices. And we've found over 20 competitive regions where the business community has come together and said we need to play a much different role than we have in the past. That we need to be proactive, we need to be organized, and we need to help the supply side become more effective and more efficient. And my analogy here is on material supply and procurement. Our manufacturers have the best systems in the world. They know how to get the right part, right time, at the right cost, right quality within a 4-hour window for manufacturing. And then you go to the human capital system and try to compare how sophisticated that is, and it's not. And so the business community has basically come together to say, let's benchmark, and what we're seeing around the country is that, where they're saying we need to be more proactive, we need to be organized, we need to develop strategy and work on systemic barriers, and then make it really efficient and easy for the supply side, which is community colleges, CTE schools, universities, and all the workforce agencies that are playing a role on the supply side to be able to deliver the right talent, right time, and with the right skills and competencies.
Before I turn to Nicole, get ready for questions. We'll have microphones in the audience, but we're going to go right to you. Nicole, the new and improved Donofrio, by the way.
Much improved.
Who could improve on Donofrio? Who are we kidding
But
here?
you're
Bookend.
right.
He's far more handsome.
I got 2 new improved.
I was going to say, yeah, I should have said that for Susan to begin with. You're looking at, congratulations. The unemployment rate in Detroit, a lot of that can be attributed to the incredibly hard work you did. I know Jeff did a lot of prep work. And Dave Meador is on the workforce board with Cindy Paskey. It's remarkable the number of Detroiters that went to work as a part of the efforts you created. How bad is it, Nicole? And as you look out there, and we know many of the things you did in the city of Detroit, but share the ones that are the most important to you.
Yeah, so I thank you, first of all. And I have to start with, yes, it's bad. But what we're focused on in the city of Detroit, and you've got to appreciate, right, like we have this unique vantage point, we have this unique set of opportunities because we are on the ground, front line, with residents, with the workforce, as Dave's talking about, solving for the kinds of challenges that both Jeff and Susan have talked about day in and day out, right? Like we are grinding through it resident by resident. And so that gives us a really unique perspective and a really unique opportunity. So what we're focused on is creating supply right now in this moment. Of course, we're thinking ahead. Of course, we're thinking 5 years out. And of course, we're thinking about what does the Economic Development Administration's Tech Hub strategy mean? And what opportunity is District Detroit bringing? And what will the Henry Ford Pistons, Michigan State University partnership mean? And what can we do to get more candidates ready at a young age for Wayne County Community College and my friend Jim here at Macomb County Community College and Henry Ford College? Like, what can we do to build the pipeline? But as we do that, you know what we have to be really serious about? Meeting people where they are right now with their everyday challenges. And so the mayor's signature programs, right, like getting young people ready through Grow Detroit's Young Talent, the Summer Youth Employment Program. We enjoy funding from Leo. We have the support of many business leaders of Michigan companies, and Dave is my co-chair right now. And you've been tremendously supportive, Dave, and the rest of the Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Foundation team. We start there, right? Like you've got to get the pipeline of young people who are, some still in school, some who have stopped out. But we've got to get that pipeline ready to feed into, that's the workforce, right? Like we've got to get them ready to feed into the workforce system. And when people get to the workforce system, given some of the challenges that Jeff talks about in education, quite candidly, we've got to close some academic gaps, right? Like we've got to close some career readiness gaps. So learn to earn. Some of you think it's nuts, right? We're going to pay people to get a high school diploma in addition to ensuring that the work that the governor is doing through any sort of high school completion program is leveraged. But we know it takes that extra incentive. Like you've got to account for the fact that people don't have income. So how are they going to pay for childcare? How are they going to pay for transportation? And ideally, it's personalized transportation because when you're crossing city lines, given the condition of our transit system, like you got some very real issues to solve for, right? We've got to account for elder care. We talk about child care a lot. Elder care is a thing. And based on the statistics you cited at the outset of this, is going to become more of a thing, right? So we're really focused on meeting people where they are, solving the challenges they're facing today. But what keeps me up at night, Dave, is when we think about the advent of a whole set of technologies that we've never seen, the impacts of which no one in this room has fully comprehended, none of us has experienced. We have no idea what the advent of all sorts of automation and artificial intelligence are going to mean to us and to the people that we have a responsibility to. That's what keeps me up at night, right? Like, we're not ready for that.
And if you're a black or brown kid in one of our cities, you may not have internet and you may not have a phone or a pad or a computer.
That's right.
And how do we expect any of those kids to catch up? And if you're in rural Michigan and you don't have broadband, how in the world do we expect any of those people to catch up? We got a lot of work to do.
Just on that issue, we've got real opportunities now. The governor established the Office of High-Speed Internet, which rests in our department. That office has been out traveling the state, listening to local communities about their struggles, because we're going to see an influx of federal dollars to help solve that problem. We're expecting over $1.5 billion, and it's not just building out the network so that there is high-speed internet in every community. It's providing access. It's equity and access. We don't know the answer to that yet. How do we do that? And so, that's why we've been meeting with a number of local communities and stakeholders who are already working on these issues at the local level to see how we best spend that money. If we spend it very deliberately, we're going to be able to solve these issues in Michigan.
It's really encouraging. So we'll turn to you for questions. Karen, have you got one? Let me, while you are all formulating that, let me explain what this is. In case you think this is a new topic, every one of these panelists have been involved in this discussion for some time. We had T-shirts made. 2023 MPC Talent Reunion Tour, because we've been talking about this for a lot of years. So every panelist gets a T-shirt. If you're asked to be a panelist in the future at one of the Ralph C. Wilson Jr. sessions, a T-shirt is thrown in for free. We got a question?
Okay, right. Good morning. Good afternoon. I would like to ask about the barriers. So we often hear about transportation and childcare. My question is, for people who haven't been in the workforce for a long time, there's also the confidence to be able to enter the workforce. How do you address issues like that?
Oh my gosh, Nicole, this is right up your alley.
This calls for putting down the iPad and scooting to the seat. So thank you for the question. One of the other signature programs that we've had the good fortune of launching in Detroit because of American Rescue Plan Act funding. So this is specifically because of funding that came directly to the city of Detroit from the Biden administration, was to take that challenge that you've just named, Naheed, and really be intentional about disaggregating it into, so how are we going to solve for that, right? Monique Marks and I were talking about this at the outset. We talk about these big problems, right? But the only way to solve for them is to disaggregate them. So there are two signature initiatives that are underway that have given us, number one, the opportunity to do that, and number two, some tremendous insights into the challenges beyond the most commonly named challenges. The first is Skills for Life. So briefly, without pulling you into any of the gory details, you work 3 days a week in a City of Detroit department. We started this with Brad Dick, who was then head of General Services, who might be in the room.
Yeah, Brad's in the back.
Brad's in the back.
He's not applauding for himself. That's someone else.
And you go to school 2 days a week. And that go to school 2 days a week, building on the point you made about the governor's programs, is either you're completing your high school diploma, or maybe you're just building literacy skills, or maybe you're pursuing some sort of other occupational skill. But the thing is, you get to do both, right? So what we heard from focus groups was, oh man, you've got to be kidding me, right? I never imagined that I'd have an opportunity to work, earn income to take care of my family, to pay the bills that I've incurred that are going to keep building, and have an opportunity to build my skill set so that this $15 an hour job isn't the end of the road for me, right? And in doing so, you're inviting residents into a community of a whole host of other opportunities and career tracks, right? Like you think about a $15 an hour to start job, which is, clearly not enough, right? Like that's not a family sustaining, that's not a living wage. If you can get in and get a foothold and have an opportunity to keep building skills, the mayor's vision for this program was not that you'd work for the city of Detroit forever, although based on the number of openings we have, we think like we'd like that, but to give you an opportunity to get in, build your skills, and find a different job with a middle skills income, right? Like this is not about creating masses of low wage employees or workers. This is about giving people an opportunity, Nahi, to your point, to see themselves in the workforce and build toward a middle income, middle class opportunity.
Right. And you mentioned transportation. Dave, the CEO group took that issue on, trying to be helpful to the Regional Transit Authority.
We did. We supported the renewals in Macomb and Wayne County, but also Oakland County supported the renewal and expansion for the Oakland County Transit, which eliminated the opt-outs. And now a colleague of ours, Dave Masseron, was named to chair the RTA, and it's another real opportunity for us to come together because transportation is such an issue. But I would also offer, since I have the mic, that there are a lot of policy issues that we've worked on together: expungement, driver responsibility fees, worked on returning citizen issues. But I would go back to where we started, which is we need to look at the workforce system. When you have an assisted living facility have a job fair, they've raised their beginning wage to $22 an hour. They've offered Uber to solve the transportation issue. They've offered to pay for childcare, and they have a job fair and no one shows up. And often it is the people that are looking for a job or a better job, they don't know about the job fair. And the people that are running these job fairs can't figure out how to get to the people, which is what you live in the middle of every day. And it's the complexity of the system.
And the inefficiency of the system.
Inefficiency of the system.
The supply side and the demand side can't find each other. I had another question.
Nicole, I love that you kind of alluded to the question of the future of work, which is really like the present of work. As we think about automation, we think about AI, which are all realities. Our Next Energy is looking to hire thousands of people. They're going to be managing robots and making sure that software is upgraded. Number one jobs in manufacturing, software developers. A lot of our production jobs could be at risk because of automation, or they're going to require entirely different skill sets because they're going to be managing automation. How can we look to communities like Miami that are very cognizant of this and think about tech equity so that those jobs are available for everyone and that workers aren't displaced by changing technology?
May I?
Please.
So, Lisa, we've got, as you know, so much work to do on that front. So, a point by which I am deeply encouraged is the work that's happening at Michigan Central Station with the state of Michigan and many other partners, many of whom are in the room, that aims to make Michigan, not Detroit, Michigan, the center point of mobility. And mobility not just as it relates to manufacturing, obviously, certainly not just limited to autos, but the epicenter of mobility in the entire world, right? Like that is Josh Syrifman, like don't miss his Mackinac moment coming up. That's his intent. Because the state, the governor and others have been so intentional about including equity as part of the strategy, the vision to start, and then the strategy, and because it shows up in all of our implementation plans, we have, I think, a better chance than we had, 5 years ago. But man, do we have a long way to go.
Right. Susan, you might take a shot at that.
Yeah, I just echo everything that Nicole has said about the Michigan Central and the MOU that we have with the state. It's just very exciting that we're all working cooperatively, not only to think about training the people that live in those neighborhoods for the opportunities that are going to be created at Michigan Central, but making sure that we're coordinating our housing investments and the Department of Natural Resources is making investments in that region, making sure that they're well coordinated. But I just wanted to mention, a model that we use frequently, and that's our employer-led collaboratives. And so we have created one. It was announced on Mackinac, I think the year before last, the EV Jobs Academy. And this is to help us make the transition from ICE to EV. And it takes everybody at the table. I think we've got over 100 groups working on this academy. We've got community colleges, we've got employers, we have other educators and other community leaders. And we're developing curriculum that employers have said they are going to need so that we can educate new employees and also incumbent employees as we make that transition.
I'm Bill Milliken, Washtenaw Community College. My question is, how do the arrivals of immigrants and foreign nationals impact the workforce in the city or around the state?
Great
Maybe
question.
could I start with that?
Please.
Just from population growth has been a real topic of discussion here, and we did a study around adult talent and where it's coming from, where it's going. So overall, the good news is we're increasing our adult talent population by about 8,000 or so a year annually. All of it is coming from immigration, because on a domestic basis, we lose about 8,500 people to other states. It's not just the warm states, right? These are states where the knowledge economy is growing the fastest. These are hubs where people are seeking jobs. It's educated talent leaving our state. But it's educated talent as immigrants who are coming in. More than 70% have a postsecondary credential. More than 50% have a bachelor's degree or more. These are individuals we should be welcoming to our state and making sure that Michigan becomes a top state for a destination for immigrants. It's the only way we're going to grow, because generally, I would say this: we're not going to be able to grow our way out of this alone. There are not going to be enough births in this state to make us a really fast-growing state in the coming years. We're going to have to look to other states, other countries, and bring in population from those places. And Michigan has to be a beacon of opportunity. Dave, the same thing, your story of your ancestors coming to this state because they saw a better life here, I bet every single one of us has something like that as a background of a story. My family, some of them came from the South. They were seeking those auto manufacturing jobs. They didn't want to be in the coal mines of West Virginia. Things have changed a lot since then, and Michigan isn't seen as that place of opportunity for as many people as we hope. So what do we need to do as a state to change that? Well, for immigration, I think we do everything possible to be a welcoming state, to make sure that people know that immigrants are welcome here, we embrace them, and that we want them as part of our community, and we're going to protect them too. I think it's good for us, yeah. And showing that we have protections for the LGBT community and many others within our state, I think it permeates other groups as well. So, I'm glad to see the pride flag out on the front porch today. Let's give an applause for that too. But it also means that we have to, really sell Michigan and create these knowledge economy hubs. And I'm so, I think, excited by what's happening with District Detroit and the U of M Center for Innovation and Michigan State and Henry Ford Health System, along with the Pistons. What they're trying to create as anchors for the healthcare industry, for the knowledge economy. What's happening at the train station that Ford is leading. I think you look at the other side of the state with Grand Rapids and you see the medical mile that has grown by leaps and bounds. And of course we know what's happened with University of Michigan in Ann Arbor and how that has attracted so many entrepreneurs and jobs. So we got to do all of the above for us to keep growing population, but immigration has to be part of it.
Let's split this immigration discussion in two. Are we doing enough with those who come to this state to get an education at one of our great institutions? Shouldn't we be stapling a green card to every diploma? Are we getting that done?
If you listen to Santa Ono, he in one of our most recent meetings said, I am here to staple that green card. Like we've done it when I was at the University of Cincinnati. We will figure out how to do it here. We're going to take him up on that challenge and really try to lean in. So I absolutely think that's got to be part of it.
Great. Let's take the other side. The myth of immigrants that come in that don't have education, that might be in a refugee position, that are looking for a neighborhood. There's seemingly a myth that they're taking jobs that could be people who are already here. They're not productive. They're chewing up the social service system. Is there any truth in that? Susan, is there any truth in that?
I think we just need to continue talking about what we're facing in Michigan. You know, you brought up many of those issues. The governor this morning announced or signed an executive order this morning on the island creating the Grow Michigan Together Commission. That's a commission that's going to look at our population and set a very clear goal of what we need to be in 2050. So we're going to be looking at a number of those things in that commission work. And obviously, when we think about Michigan, and to Mr. Milliken's question, immigrants, new Americans have to be seen as an asset. And I think if people understand, I mean, they see what our labor struggles are now. They see the struggle that employers have to do that hiring. People will hopefully start to lose some of those impressions. If you see some of the work that's happening at the local level, Global Detroit is doing fantastic things. We've got the Office of Global Michigan, but all of our local Michigan Works agencies are doing work to create opportunities for people who are coming to the state. The West Michigan Works did a great video of a story about an Afghan arrival who came, who had very clear skills sewing. He owned his own business in Afghanistan, had to flee the country and came to Michigan. And they did everything they knew to connect with a local employer who could use his skills, bring in interpreters, and there's very strong testaments now about the opportunities that have been presented to him, but also on the part of the employer about what making that extra effort has done in terms of enriching their workplace and getting a highly, highly skilled employee.
I'll take that one point further. Or to build on that, Susan, or the mayor was very intentional about accepting, recruiting, welcoming Afghan refugees into Detroit. Maybe there were a couple hundred that we figured out a temporary housing solution for. So they were in hotels for a period of time. And then we, through the housing department, worked to find permanent housing solutions, but they were among some of the first employees or the early employees in the Skills for Life program that I mentioned earlier. And there's no displacement, right? Like there's so much opportunity. That's the thing that we've been focused on in Detroit, and I think across the rest of the region in the state, is making Detroit and the region a state a place of opportunity. There's no shortage of opportunity. Being intentional about the way that you integrate refugees or immigrants into a community is really the way that you make that work for everyone.
But we're at a point now, and you've heard the mayor say this, there's a job for everybody that wants it. And when you talk to business people and say, how are things going? Said, really good, but I can't find labor. Or for a lot of you that try to get services at your home, and I just recently went through this where they said, well, we can come out the end of July, and said, we can't find workers. Said, pay more. They said, no, you don't understand. We cannot find workers.
One other thing just on the point of immigration here. So we're talking about what the local community and the state can do. We know we have a huge problem at the federal level on immigration, right? And I'll sum it up this way. Democrats are too afraid to take this on because they think they'll lose elections, and Republicans want to burn down the House, speaking of the ashes here. We have to change that dynamic in Washington if we're going to solve this, because this country is strong because of immigration. Again, none of us would be here.
We wouldn't be here.
Right. So, and Jeff, aren't we a low immigration state compared to the rest of the country?
We're okay. We're 16th in the country, but you know it's 16th in a shrinking pie, ever shrinking pie of immigrants who are coming to this country, and especially when you look at immigrants who are scientists, who are adding to that knowledge economy, who want to grow businesses and be entrepreneurs, they're starting to choose other countries because it's so hard to get through our system. They're going to places in Europe, especially. They're going to places in Southeast Asia that are being welcoming to them. And if we lose out on this, it's going to hurt our economy for decades and decades, and we're going to be a poorer nation because of it.
There was a question in the back.
Yes, hi. I'm Rochelle Riley, and the fierce competition for talent begins in middle school. So can you please speak to the education gap between what high schools in Michigan are teaching, what the colleges are offering, and what the labor force actually needs next year, in 5 years, and 10 years? Thank you.
Well, we do know, Rochelle, we know, and I think everybody in the room has read the data on how far behind we've dropped with COVID loss in education, which is alarming. I mean, we lost more than the rest of the nation, so we already were behind, and we got further behind. Susan, what are you thinking about on that front?
Well, when we talk about the work that the Population Commission will be doing, a strong part of that component is our K-12 as well as our higher education system, and taking a look at what we need to do. A lot has happened in the past 4 years in terms of providing equity to school funding. It's taken years and years post Proposal A, but schools are now equitably funded. Our foundation formula is the highest that it's ever been, but obviously, more work needs to be done.
Anybody else want to take that one on? We're all running away from that question, Rochelle.
I'll take it on, right?
I was going to say, except I'm going to put Donofrio on the spot because Launch Michigan is something that's under the umbrella of BLM.
Well, I get to chair Launch Michigan as a new 501c3 that evolved from a coalition. And what we've been doing for the last 5 years is talking about the state of education. Now, we've been talking about all of the different approaches from the different points of view that have been taken. A little more money here, some accountability systems, some repeal of those systems. Maybe we do something different on teachers. All of it has been sort of silver bullet one-off. It's not addressed the systemic issue that we see, which is this education system, as I said earlier, is not designed for today's economy. It's not designed to help students to succeed in the way that we need now and in the future. It's not because we don't have great teachers and administrators and they aren't working really hard, but we need to have a framework, which we developed at Launch Michigan, implemented in Michigan, that says we're going to balance 3 issues. We're going to balance what a high school diploma should look like and represent. What is that world-class outcome that we want as a state? Places like Maryland said it's a 10th grade level of education that allows you to go into a community college and test out of any remedial course, so that you have at least that base level of education. That would put them as world-class today in the United States if they were to achieve it. But they balanced 2 other things: accountability and governance, right? Making sure that you knew that the outcomes were achievable because you set up a system to make it work, and then the resources that were necessary. And really important to those resources, an equity multiplier that targeted individuals in poverty and said, poverty is a form of trauma. And individuals who've experienced that are not going to learn at the same level and the same rate as their colleagues. So you need at least a 35% or more equity multiplier to help those kids who need more resources, who need more time, and make sure that you're measuring it at various levels of their educational career so that they're on track. We've got to implement that. It's a long past time, and I tell you, the frustration you see from the business community is that through every 2-year cycle of elections, all we seem to do is focus on little one-off issues that might be important, but aren't getting to the broader impact that we want to see.
Do we have time? That's my concern on this question. The education system turnaround is decades long. What do we do in the interim?
Well, I mean, the best time to have done it would have been, a decade ago. The next best time is every day since that time. So, we need to do something right now, and the longer we wait, the longer it takes us to set up and advance something like the Launch Michigan framework, the further behind we're going to fall. If we're 40th in the nation right now, we cannot afford to wait.
I would argue there is one other thing we can do right now, and double down on after-school programming, out-of-school time programming.
Yeah.
And that's the only way we can catch up in the short term. But the long-term solution, we've got to give some focus.
Yeah, it doesn't mean we don't have quick wins. We don't have things that we're all pursuing to try to fix the problem today for the students that are going through the system, because there's 2 million kids under the age of 18 in this state. We can't leave them behind as we look to a 10-year decade approach to getting to be a top performer.
So Dave,
I just didn't mention 2 things that the governor has proposed in her budget, which if I had been on my when I was on my local school board, I would have been ecstatic to see, and that she has proposed a universal pre-K for every 4-year-old in Michigan. I think that could be absolutely transformational for Michigan's households. We've already touched on the burden of childcare. I think that could be a tool that would attract people to Michigan. If you were a young family coming to Michigan and you knew that, at 4 you had a public option instead of paying for childcare. And she has also proposed free and reduced lunch, breakfast and lunch in every school district in Michigan. If we could remove the stigma of a student using free and reduced breakfast or lunch, and just how supportive that would be for every household. I was a single parent, and if I just knew my kids going off to school, I didn't have to worry about getting breakfast or forcing them to eat, and that every child had breakfast at school.
Susan, do you know if developmental screening will be part of that universal pre-K?
No, I do not. Not being in educate, not being in ed.
Yeah, it's a little off my pay grade too. But everything I'm
20
reading,
departments.
right? Everything I'm reading from the early childhood work the Wilson Foundation is doing points to that being the first point of intervention and being able to steer kids onto the right track. And we have not done enough in this state to do that.
Talk to Michelle Richard. She is, she's the person who's heading this up for the governor, and have conversations with
Dave.
I was just going to answer your question, do we have time? And the answer is no. We can't come to Mackinac every year and talk about the same things over and over. It's like Groundhog Day. And and this all interrelates. We've talked about the fact the population's not growing and it's aging. We've talked about the need to grow and diversify economy. We've talked about the need to have very sophisticated workforce systems. But the foundation of the house is the K through 12 system. And we have to stop dodging this ball to say we have to address funding and accountability and governance, which is the launch framework, and stop talking and acting on it.
Great. Thank you, Dave. I couldn't agree more with that. Karen?
Hi, I'm actually here for the first time this year, and I'm really encouraged to hear about the alignment. We're a Livonia-based, product development-based manufacturer, and we've been in business for 67 years. We have such a hard time finding labor because it's great. I'm a college graduate. I have an advanced degree. Not everybody is going to go on that path. We make a lot of lip service, I feel like, to certificate programs or skills-based training, but I don't know what the state is really doing because we always end up talking about a knowledge-based economy. So what it leaves me thinking is maybe I need to move my factory south because Michigan is not doing anything to help us. And that even comes down to immigrants. I'd take an immigrant any day. I just need somebody who's willing to show up to work and maybe is not going to get paid $30 an hour. Our beginning wage is $15, and being an automotive supplier, that's a little rough even for us. And I just listened to somebody else, Brightmeyer Interiors, talking about the same thing. Our cost structures do not allow for a lot of these higher wages that we're talking about. People can grow within our company. We have employees who've been there 40 and 50 years. We're a great place to work. We're clean. There was a picture of us in one of the local papers where kids were sitting on the floor on National Manufacturing Day. They could eat on the floor. It's that clean. It's changed. But the wages that everybody's talking about, I don't think that we're creating a structure for people who can actually be at those somewhat lower levels, but still have a decent living and a decent place to go to work.
Thank you for that question. Jeff?
Yeah, I was just going to, solving for skilled trades and apprenticeships and certificate programs, it's something we absolutely have to do. I mean, I think, I'm going to say 2 places where I think this can be strengthened. We need to wrap our arms around community colleges and help them become conduits into these jobs, right? Into apprenticeship programs, pre-apprenticeship programs, high-skilled certificates, to be able to meet the need of local employers like yourself. I mean, that's what community colleges at their best are designed to do, is meet labor gaps. I also want to say that education reform at the K-12 level also means helping to provide pathways into career technical education that leads to apprenticeships, that leads to those types of manufacturing jobs. One of the things that Nicole, Dave, and I did when we were in Detroit working together, that's getting the band back together, as you said, the reunion tour, was to look at, what were the pathways into skilled trades that Detroiters could go through. And for years, the CTE Center at Randolph, which is one of the career technical education centers that the Detroit Public Schools runs, was 1,000 people enrolled every year and providing great pathways to these lifestyles and these jobs that are paying more than six-figure in many cases. But that school had fallen off. It had maybe 70, 80 students in it. It was a full-time high school. The classrooms weren't what it looked like on the job site. There was no connection or very little connection to the unions. So we raised $10 million and went in and renovated these classrooms, brought and paid for teachers from apprenticeship programs, created unique partnerships with Wayne County Community Colleges and other training providers. And then when the students were done during the day, we brought in adults at night to go through that same training with the same equipment, with the same instructors. And that's the type of model that, unfortunately, because we don't have a solution for that in our K-12 system, we had to come in and fill the gap, raise lots of money from DT Energy, who was the first $1 million, and the Ralph Wilson Foundation, and many of you in the audience, and get around many of the different barriers that stood in our way of trying to help a whole bunch of students who really were interested in pursuing this pathway from being able to take it. Now, in Michigan, half of students have a local CTE millage that would pay for this type of equipment and this type of work, and half don't. It's a huge inequity that just exists. Even you can see in the Detroit metro region. Wayne County has no millage. Oakland County does. It's night and day, the CTE centers that you see. So solving the K-12 problem, one of the things in the framework we say is you've got to have a legitimate CTE path to fill those types of jobs.
One thing that troubles me, and that was, by the way, the CTE work was terrific. The way it kicked off, the way the business community in Detroit jumped in. I think there's a trust problem between the employer side and the prep side that hasn't been overcome. So even in those CTE programs, we saw employers almost raising their eyebrows going, well, I'll wait and see if this works.
Yeah, right.
And how do we overcome that? Susan, how does the state overcome that?
Well, I was just going to add, kind of building on what Jeff said, he talked about the critically important role that community colleges play. We also need to work to bring greater synergy between the community colleges and the Michigan Works agencies. Michigan Works agencies are on the ground working with employees and employers. I think that's a tool to help bridge that gap. Michigan is the only state in the country that does not have in state government a place where we can bring that common vision and guidance and support our community colleges and our Michigan Works agencies to the extent that they need. We don't have a way of providing flexible dollars for them to meet, the local needs that they know are happening in their region. We don't have an easy way of sharing data or best practices. So that's an area where we need to bring even greater focus in these coming months.
So I want to, if you don't mind, I want to bring this question back to the very real problem that you just described. Because you have now framed an economic development challenge, right? So the last thing that we want to have happen is we don't want to lose your business to another state. I know that my colleague Greg Petoniak, I think, is in the back of the room and would love to try to figure out how to solve the talent problem with you. But the thing that we have to be better about is thinking around the circle and walking around the circle of what a $15 an hour, I don't know if that's what you pay, I'm not asking, but I heard you, right, on this is not a high-wage job, right? So if we intend to prevent a company like yours from A, moving to another state, or B, automating the work, the tasks, so that you lower or manage your costs in some way, like that's an economic development problem that unless we take into account the partnerships that are possible with the state, with our corporate partners to help solve for, so what does childcare cost someone? And how do we use state resources or other resources to help solution for that? What are the other challenges that make it impossible to live on a $15 or $16 or $17 an hour job? What kinds of housing solutions do we have to be more mindful of? How are we going to solve for workforce housing so that folks can afford to live in a place that's not far from your establishment so that they don't have a transportation problem, right? Like there are so many good solutions and good interventions in pockets that we need to be better about thinking around the circle for, so that if we're serious about Michigan being a top 10 state in which to do business, build your new business, be an entrepreneur, be a startup. We've got to find very real solutions to your very real problem.
Dave, you faced this. You faced this at DTE and made a run at trying to create a path to tree trimmers.
Right. So we tree trimming is we have about 1,000 people. Most utilities do on any given day tree trimming, and it's hard work and it's good work, but it's a step to then become an apprenticeship for an overhead lines person who make a lot of money, work hard and a lot of overtime, but we couldn't get tree trimmers. And it's an example of an employer-led system. So we said we need to do something. We were importing tree trimmers from out of state and paying a huge penalty to do that. So we did two things. One is we went to the state prison because we had saw something in Montgomery County, Maryland, where they did vocational training in the prison. And it took a while to work with the prison to convince them to allow tree trimming, which includes chainsaws in the prison. But they eventually, we created the school with the director of corrections, and it worked out really great. So the people in the tree trimming school at the prison, if they go through the program, when they leave, they have a job, they're in the union, they have health care, they have retirement, and the recidivism rate is almost non-existent if you come out of prison with a job. And then the second thing we did, because there is no diversity in tree trimming in Michigan, is said we need to step into this in a hard way. So we worked with Nicole and the mayor and created a tree trimming school in the city of Detroit. And it's an example of one of these employer-led said we can't just sit back and rely on a system that's not working. We're going to have to step in and create hardwire this and create our own system of returning citizens and people of color in Detroit that want to get into tree trimming.
We have time.
Right. Yes.
These issues are so complex. I mean, I've always reminded of E.L. Mencken, the great American journalist, who said, for every complex problem, there's a simple solution, and it's probably wrong. And this proves it, right? I mean, the complexity of this.
No, but I think we want to acknowledge this. This is really hard for big companies.
It's huge, huge problem.
With incredible resources. So if it's hard for big companies, I can't imagine the challenges for medium.
And as Nicole said, we've got to start knitting this together better. Right? So we have time for one more question for each of you. And it's around, well, not from them. That was probably Brad Dick asking a question. We've got to go to a final question here. I'm sorry, Jennifer. She's going to get me. Jeanette's going to get me later for not letting her ask a question. What's giving you hope now as you look out? And I'll start because I've been doing panels on workforce at this conference off and on for a long time. What gives me hope is I'm hearing a consensus on problem and the beginning of alignment on solution. And when we started these conversations, when we said workforce, it was about those that had the most difficulty getting employed. The conversation today is about talent and about a top-to-bottom system that can work and can start to knit together solutions. And I have a lot of hope in that. Susan, what's giving you hope?
Well, we've talked about a lot of things today. The Michigan Central Station, that really gives me hope. If you ever have an opportunity to visit the vocational village, it's one of the coolest things I've ever visited. I walked out and I was so proud that we were doing that in state government. What gives me hope are two programs that we have going. The Going Pro Talent Fund, it's a program where we grant dollars to employers to train their employees. We know that on average, an employee who undergoes training through their employer supported by this program will, on average, increase their salary by almost 10%. These are, good, strong wage jobs. And then also the Michigan Reconnect program, which provides a tuition-free pathway for anybody in Michigan over the age of 25 to receive a 2-year community college degree or a skills certificate. And that program, we're running, in celebration of graduation, we're running stories about people who have benefited from that program. But if you talk to people, I'm sure there are people in your life who are being impacted by that. I visited one of our local offices, and one of our employees came up to us. She was not the age of a traditional college student. And because of the nature of her work, she was on the front line, and she was in our offices, and she took advantage of the precursor to Reconnect, which is our Future for Frontline program. And she said to me she thought she would never have the opportunity to get a college degree. She applied for the Frontliner program. She immediately enrolled in Lansing Community College. She just sent me a note a couple of weeks ago that she graduated in May with an associate's degree in business finance, and she graduated summa cum laude.
Wow, that's a great story. Jeff?
Yeah, Dave, I think what's encouraged me is when I moved back to Michigan in 2015 to run workforce development for the city of Detroit, thanks to Tom Luan and the mayor and many others, and Dave. But I saw there was this report from J.P. Morgan Chase that said there were 400 organizations doing workforce development in the city of Detroit. There's probably $100 million going in every year, and Nicole was the author of that report, by the way. We still weren't moving the needle. We still had the highest poverty rate, the lowest residential employment rate, some of the highest unemployment rates generally. And you just saw that kind of number just hover and plateau, even though there were 400 organizations doing really good work. Because you could go to every one of those organizations and see success. You could see success, you could see good programs, metrics that were saying that they were moving the needle in their own individual organization, but it wasn't adding up to something. And it took us kind of taking a step back and saying, we need to put some really lofty goals in place that said, all of us are going to point our light at trying to get 40,000 more Detroiters employed in the short term and 100,000 more in the long term. And that started changing the dynamic. It started changing the way people invested and acted. It's the same thing that's happening at the state because of the 60 by 30 goal that the governor put in place. And it's the same thing that I hear over and over again in this conference and others, that we have to stop just trying to win the media cycle. We have to stop trying to put all our eggs in a programmatic basket and say in 10 years, in 20 years, this is what we want the state to look like. And then we're going to create lots of different activities and programs and efforts to get there. So that's what encourages me, because I feel like we've turned a bit of a page here.
Dave, what's giving you hope?
What's given me hope is I'm a fan of Jim Collins, who wrote the book Good to Great and Great by Choice. And one of his concepts is you can't get better without what he calls brutal reality, facing it. And I think we're finally, as a community, doing it, but doing it with the and, doing it in a collaborative way to say, here's what's working, and here's what's not, and let's do something about it and take action. And you're seeing a lot of action.
Nicole?
So 2 things give me hope, Dave. The first is all that you've just described. And I think we are facing, I'd like to believe, we are facing the brutal facts in a way that we haven't before. I think that your call, Dave, to let's not have Groundhog Day, let's not keep talking about this, is compelling. I am encouraged by the degree to which the federal government and the state are requiring collaboration as a function of participating. So if you look at the Economic Development Administration's, the EDA's, Tech Hubs grants, like collaboration is not optional. It's the only way you'll have a successful application. And the last thing that gives me hope is this wave of technology, AI and automation, that are already here in ways that folks in this room that I don't fully appreciate. The truth is, I have hope because we don't have a choice anymore. Solving these solutions, we're at the end of.
A quick plug. The Wilson Foundation has a program, a podcast and education storytelling series called Tight Knit, tightknit.org. Tight Knit is a program that focuses on how communities and solutions for problems can be knit closer together. We did an award-winning series on caregivers, and a new one is being released today on workforce. So if you go to tightknit.org, Apple Podcast, you can start to listen to workforce issues in an 8-part series that will come out week after week. And WDTE has been our partner in this production, and we're looking forward to extending education even more through that. Help me thank our panelists for their time today. Thank you.